Welcome to the Career Revolution podcast, where big ideas for big careers start small, and it's never too late to start. My name is Licia Dewing, and I'm a career strategist, and I am your host of this podcast. Today we have Jaclyn Everson, who is our guest. Jaclyn comes from a food product development background. She's transitioned into being an entrepreneur, and she's spent nearly 2 decades creating dynamic, delicious products for her customers and clients to eat. Jaclyn's passionate about inspiring change through her consultancy, Future Incorporated, which she's going to tell us all about, and how she uses innovation to deliver meaningful impact in the food industry. Jaclyn's career is an absolute testament to the power of blending purpose and creativity. And without any further ado, welcome. Hello, Jaclyn. Welcome to the Career Revolution podcast.
Hello, Licia. Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure to be here with you.
It's an absolute pleasure, and so excited to have you here to speak about all the things that you've been doing, all the revolutions in your career. But let's get started from the beginning. I'm going to hand over to you. Start your story from whichever beginning point you choose, but tell us about yourself from the start.
Thanks. Well, I suppose it started very, very long ago when I was really rather young, hanging out with my gran after school at her house. Both my parents were working, and after school I used to head to my gran's house she was the family matriarch. She used to do all the cooking for the family, for the church. And really my passion for food came from being with her at home, watching her cook, watching her bake. She did it out of love. It wasn't a necessity. She just needed to love her people in that way. And it was just such a lovely time, a carefree time of just, communing with my grandmother, and a very special love affair for food developed from there. And I grew up in a small town in Zimbabwe, and we didn't really have things like cooking schools, or I didn't even know that cooking schools really existed at that time, many moons ago. And I did some digging, and we used to come here to Cape Town on holiday, and Silwood School of Cooking was one of the places that just was absolutely renowned for an incredible foodie background, an adventure into the culinary world. And that's where it all started for me. I trained to become a chef at Silwood once I left school. And I guess they say the rest is history, but there's so much in between there. A quick realization once I joined the industry, once I started cooking in hotels and restaurants and so on, I realized that the environment was demanding, no doubt, but I think I was just missing something a little bit more, a little bit more challenging, a little bit more inspiring, a little bit more multi-dimensional, if I could say that. And I didn't know what that was, but once I moved into my second year at Silwood, I then had an opportunity to go into the industry.
So that thing that you've just said is what I've often heard within our stories, is that we've gravitated towards studying something, or we've gravitated towards a thing which we love. But when we learn about that thing and we take it into the world, the way in which the world wants us to do that thing then suddenly doesn't feel right, or it's just not the way that we want to do it. And when you were describing your early influence with your grandmother, I could almost smell the baking. I could hear the pot stirring and soup. I mean, it was a very visceral understanding. So Silwood really presented you with, you can be a chef in a restaurant, you can be a chef on a boat, you can do, this is a thing that you love to do, but there were limited ways in which you could do it. So take us back to year 2 and what happened.
Yeah, I guess, they definitely form the basis of a very well-rounded structure in French cuisine. And from there, I suppose the world is your oyster, as big as your imagination, right? And so in my second year, we were placed into what we call in-service blocks, where you're placed into a work environment and you're there for 2 months and you learn as apprentice. And my first block was at Woolworths head office in the product development department. And the minute I got there, I knew that that was it. That was absolutely a corner of the industry of this foodie world that I wanted to be in, because it wasn't just food, preparing food. It was looking at recipe development, at recipe construction of ingredients and suppliers and growers and farmers and commercial aspects of how a product performs. It was packaging design. There were so many aspects to it, food safety and microbiology. And I realized in that moment that there was a whole world of food that could just absolutely open up for me. And I was just thrilled that it existed, and that I didn't have to sort of struggle in the back kitchens while my friends were out having fun and, enjoying their weekends or their evenings socializing. There was actually something out there that suited me and what I wanted for my life. So yeah.
So what was the first role? So from Silwood, you were then absorbed straight into Woolworths. You went straight into...
I wasn't actually. From Silwood, I spent 3 years at Silwood. So I ran through all my in-service blocks. I went into hotels, I went into catering kitchens and the like. And then I chose one place at the end of it to spend the whole of my third year, which was Element House. And that was an extraordinary experience to work in a kitchen like that. And once I'd finished at Element House and I'd graduated from Silwood, I then got a holiday job as a private chef. A family had rented a villa and they needed somebody to do the cooking. And I then went into this journey of private chefing over the next 8 to 9 months, and found myself in wonderful places in and around Europe along the Mediterranean coastline. And that was sort of my introduction into the working world. A pretty awesome introduction into the working world, no doubt. I got to work really, really hard, but see some absolutely gorgeous places. And that was sort of the first step for me into my working life and to start this journey of culinary discovery. I think absolutely every experience that we have leads us to something that can benefit a professional endeavor, right? And all of these experiences, whether they were good ones or less good ones, because there certainly were less good ones, formed part of this culinary portfolio that I'm able to lean on today.
Okay, so it was the block that exposed you to the food development side within a corporate retailer that made you go, this is it, this is it.
This is the
But graduating, you still wanted to do what many of us perhaps have done or had the opportunity, which is that Antipodean, travel the world, University of Life, explore and gather information. And I'm sure Element House would have, fueled that with the hospitality, travel, tourism. How they're a pinnacle within that, within the Cape Town.
Yeah, they really are. They've been they were amazing. I think that first family that I worked for, that was a referral that came through Element House, and they were so supportive in that sort of leap into my working career. I knew that I needed to get a lot of experience under my belt before I even attempted to try to approach a company like Woolworths to become a product developer. There was so much learning and mostly growing that I needed to do in order to kind of have that sort of emotional readiness and preparedness to take on the kind of role that that environment facilitated. And it turned out that it wasn't Woolworths in the end, it was Pick n Pay. And I'm so glad that I found Pick n Pay when I did. It really came beautifully and organically. And that was an incredible journey too, because Pick n Pay hadn't had a product development team when I joined. I was part of the founding team of product developers there. And so this fully formed functioning department at Woolworths, which I first experienced, was sort of this ideal of what it could be. And then joining this at this very established family business, a couple of years later, as part of that founding group of people who are now going to, really kind of put a formal process in place and really take the product strategy at Pick n Pay and really kind of accelerate it. That was an extraordinarily exciting time to join that company. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
I'm sure. I can imagine how fascinating to be able to start with in a new role for you, but a new role for the company too, to have that opportunity of that shaping and learning on both sides as you go. Tell us about your time at Pick n Pay, because you've been there for, it feels like a lifetime. It's the.
I always tell people, they look at me and they go, "What? 18 years? Are you crazy? You were at Pick n Pay for 18 years." And I look at them and I go, I know. It surprises me as well, because the time just absolutely flies. I think
to your testament, my apologies for the interruption though, but so many different, I know you held such vast differences in roles throughout those 18. It might have been under one company banner, but what diversity. So tell us about that. Tell us about how, if I can ask, how did you get the role at Pick n Pay? Was it through a referral? Did you apply for it? How did that actual first thing start?
Yeah, it was through a referral. I had a colleague from Silwood who had started, it actually was a side hustle. She was recruiting personal chefs for jobs, and she was approached by Pick n Pay to recruit a team of product developers. They knew they needed foodie people, and she absolutely had her finger on the pulse. And so 5 of us were employed at that initial sort of outset, and a vast number from Silwood as well. So that was the beginning of the journey, and it landed me in a position of a product developer for convenience foods or prepared meals. And that was in the fresh food space, which is very dynamic and very fast moving. I got to really understand the business at a base level, because we everything starts in stores with customers and with store colleagues. And so taking the time to really explore the business, get to know the business, that time was spent in stores and with suppliers, so in factories, on farms. And that really gave me a complete picture of the environment in which I'd landed. And I soon realized that I needed to listen more and talk less, because as much as I knew about food, very little I knew about retailing, which is a very complex and fascinating business. And so it started in convenience foods, and that was kind of my introduction into product development and that formal process that we spoke about earlier. And I was in that role for about 5 years before I was promoted to a manager role. And that role encompassed all departments at Pick n Pay in private label. So private label is a supplier's or a retailer's own brand product. And I was the manager of all product development teams across the piece. So fresh foods, long life groceries, frozen goods. It also included some non-edible items like pet food and health and beauty and baby products and. So that was a really big leap from, just staying in my lane doing my prepared foods, and then moving into a manager role and leading a team of people, but across an absolutely huge portfolio of categories. And that was a massive learning curve for me. Just truly such an opportunity.
How really fantastic. And you were ready for it. You met it with your readiness, and clearly they saw in you the opportunity of your ability to do this. So suddenly you shift up into budgets and ROIs and people, and in a way learning all the stuff about entrepreneurialism, but within the safe confines of an organization. But Pick n Pay fundamentally was an entrepreneurial business that started, a family-owned business. So yes, it's very corporate, but there was always that ability for you to see things as they were and feel close enough to the decisions that were being made. So interesting that your transition into that senior role, climbing the traditional corporate ladder, but actually going broad with adding to your skill set, your base set.
Indeed. Yeah, it honestly was an incredible experience. I I look back on it and I'm so grateful, but I'm also quite overwhelmed at everything that was sort of presented to me in trust and carrying on behalf of the business. It really was a bold move, I think, by my mentor at the time. She saw something in me, and I'm so grateful to her for that opportunity. I mean, it just absolutely opened my eyes. It also opened doors to another layer of a very large retail organization, which in corporate is very layered. And you start to become noticed, and people start to get to know you, and you start to develop relationships outside of that small little bubble of yours, which kind of can just be sort of your immediate departments and surrounds. And it really then made me realize that there's so many more facets to this business that I could influence, and that I really wanted to dig into, and make some meaningful, credible change. And I think that's the reason I stayed for 18 years, is because there were so many juicy bits of awesome work to be done, and a great team of people around to support in doing it.
So can you tell us about what you mean by juicy bits of awesome work to be done? Because I know you well enough to know that that looked like impact shifting, changing, and making something better. This was not just juicy bits as a tick on your career ladder. This was about really affecting some small change, but it started small, but it got bigger and bigger and bigger as you grew in your career.
Yeah, no doubt. I think it really was so varied, Licia. There were things like refining a packaging design across all categories to be cohesive and to speak with one voice. A lot of the work over the years had been done sort of in silos at various times in the history of the company. And a lot of those came from more sort of individual groups rather than one cohesive sort of spearhead, perhaps, if I could call it that. And that was one of the things that really I felt quite passionate about, to show the customer that there's a brand story here. And if you go down this journey or down this aisle in Pick n Pay, you'll be able to see those Pick n Pay products at a glance. Whereas before, you kind of really had to sort of look at the shelf and go, oh, that's a Pick n Pay product. And then behind you on the shelf over there would be something that was also a Pick n Pay product, but it looked really different. And so there was this sort of golden thread that needed to be strung through everything, so that the customer would then very easily be able to shop your product in the very busy aisles in the stores. So that was one of the things. And then a second thing was looking at farmers, looking at sources of supply, looking at where products are grown and how products are grown. Fruits and vegetables, for example, seasonality, looking at expanding into different farming methods, perhaps instead of open fields, looking at tunnels for certain parts of the country at certain times of the year, when you can sort of stretch a season a little bit longer so that customers can have that product for just a slight, if it's a couple of weeks, it makes a difference in people's lives. And so looking at ways in which to make the shopping experience easier, but also to help those suppliers and to help those farmers just maximize on that opportunity that they have with a Pick n Pay as best they possibly can. So lots more
Mm.
opportunities like that to share.
So fascinating. And now tell us about Future Incorporated. So the 18 years of this incredible development and growth, where I love the way you said, I was really, she took a chance on me. My mentor believed in me. She saw something in you and you lived up to it. You held it. You were there for it. But this desire for impacting, this desire for affecting change that you were able to use within the function and the role that you had has now just, the doors are wide open with Future in terms of how meaningful impact in the food industry you can guide through the use of innovation. Tell us about Future. Tell us about this fabulous vehicle that you've created.
Yeah, I think Future really has been, I guess, in the background for longer than I've realized. To be quite honest, it's been this passion for, as you say, this vehicle for helping small businesses, medium businesses, big businesses realize opportunity in a way that innovation unlocks. So really kind of working around practical issues that businesses face, food production environments face, to be able to show that there are ways forward. It just takes, a slightly different approach. It always does involve some level of risk, certainly, but I mean, no risk, no reward, right? And these are the ideas and the concepts I think that Future is aiming to establish, in that a little bit of design thinking specifically can go a long way. You don't necessarily just need to, look at your immediate landscape. You can look at so many other industries and so many other platforms of problem solving to be able to solve something that, might not have been so obvious perhaps to you in that particular world in which you work or live. And that's really, I think, what Future has the opportunity to unlock for people. Bringing that level of insight, experience, and really just making sure that the product that reaches your customer, whoever that customer is at the end of the day, is perfectly aligned with what their needs are, and what your vision is as a company. And that's really, I think, where the sweet spot with Future lies.
And you're using masterclasses to be able to not only work one-on-one with clients, but tell us about the masterclass. Tell us about how that evolved.
Yeah, so the masterclass was a really lovely thing that came about through an extraordinary individual called Miles Kubeka. I think if anybody doesn't know who Miles Kubeka is in the South African and African context, ticka away, because he is a person to know, he is a person to follow, he is a visionary in ensuring that through his passion of food, he is able to make tangible, meaningful, significant difference in people's lives. And he and I were introduced through Pick n Pay. He had done some research and some trend work with us at the time. And I remember thinking, this is a guy I need to stay close to, because he is so dynamic and he is so innovative. And you just are so drawn to him because apart from being all of those things, he's also incredibly charismatic and really warm and genuine and has a great sense of humor, and is a really lovely person. And I'd connected with him after I left Pick n Pay, and I say to him, look, Miles, what are you up to? How are things? I really just wanted to connect with those people who I felt genuinely connected to, drawn to. I'm wanting to build my network. And he had said to me, look, we'd met at Maker's Landing at the V&A waterfront. He'd said, look at this amazing place. this is a place that needs some inspiration, that needs your experience, that needs your background. There's a program here called the Incubation Program by Makers Landing, and we need people like you to come in and give masterclasses to the entrepreneurs so that they can understand how to access a retailer like Pick n Pay. What are the challenges? What are the pitfalls? What do they need to look out for? What do they need to know? And that's how these product development masterclasses began, through an opportunity, through Miles. And I really have been so warmed by the reception of them, because people really seem to connect with the stories that I'm sharing. Those anecdotes, I've shared a couple with you today, and they really seem to resonate and give people a little bit of inspiration and hope that these big retailers in South Africa are so open to supporting local companies, supporting local businesses, and there are ways in which to access that, and these facilitate that.
How fabulous. And I know you've got a whole bunch of creative projects up your sleeve and you're working on some. Can you tell us about one or two, or one that you've completed, something that's practical and tangible for all our listeners who I know are going to be dropping lots of questions and comments? But for now, describe one of the creative projects that you have completed as Future.
So Future, we've just had such a lovely time. It's been a journey, specifically with a wonderful regenerative wine farm called Spear. I think maybe some people have heard of it. I'd had a wonderful visit on Spear with Farmer Angus. And Farmer Angus does farm tours for anybody who is interested and is in the Stellenbosch area. And my husband, my daughter, and I had gone on one of his farm tours and ended up being the only person on that tour, because that day apparently there was a storm coming. It didn't eventually arrive. And we had Angus all to ourselves. And Angus absolutely is the most incredible person in the regenerative farming space. He is doing the most phenomenal progressive things on the farm, and is really taking regenerative farming in South Africa to an incredible space. And one of the challenges that he's facing with his retail products is getting them out there and having that competitive space. He doesn't necessarily see it as competition, because his product is so vastly different in terms of his charcuterie products to what is available in the market. Doesn't add nitrates. He doesn't add nitrates. It's really phenomenal grass-reared, pasture-raised pork, and he really is doing the most incredible things to showcase this phenomenal meat and animal byproduct that is from the farm. And said to me, Jaclyn, how do we do this? Like, how do I get my products out there? And one of the suggestions that I had come up with for him was to put these hamper kits together. So Spear have a wonderful variety of products available on their website, on their farm, in their farm shops, the Picnickery and the Cowshed. And I had literally just gone onto the website as I was on my phone on the farm, and I'd taken this and I'd taken that and I'd taken this, and I'd said to him, Angus, look, we've got a bougie boerewors roll with something, and this is how we can create some excitement for your products. And that was the first project that we did together. There are a couple of others in the works at the moment, but literally just finding a niche for these incredible products that he has in a way that makes it accessible and easy for people at home to just click, couple of products, add them into your cart and buy them, or go to the farm shop and do that there. It really has been quite significant. And
serendipitous in a way, being the only person on the tour and having that one-on-one time with them to be able to explore and open up those conversations, which at some point, I think you would have crossed paths with him, because Future, I have no doubt, is going to continue to create and pull innovation to give voice and visibility to these amazing, phenomenal food development, startup, agriculture, products that many of us aren't aware of yet, if it weren't for somebody like you bringing them to the fore and sharing with us. I want to segue a bit to the actual career revolution, and how did, after 18 years of being defined by the person that works at Pick and Pay, how did that transition work for you? How did you find that? What advice? There's a career revolutionary tip there, I think, but talk to us about that moment of switching off that Pick and Pay badge, switching off that.
My goodness, gosh, it really was a significant change, and it didn't happen overnight. I think perhaps I expected it to be this very sort of cut and dry, clean and simple sort of, okay, today I'm working at a corporate in a business environment, and tomorrow I'm not. It very much wasn't that simple. It really required a lot of personal reflection, a lot of self-awareness in those moments where I was, feeling something, whether it be positive or negative or somewhere in between. It really required myself to show up and be present, and really just allow whatever I was feeling to kind of come out. Because you can't go from 18-year career to, the next thing, and not sort of, feel a particular way. So that for me was quite significant. And I found a tremendous resource or positive response for myself and from myself in nature. I realized that I needed to get out. I needed to allow fresh air to come in and ocean water to go over. And it really helped me kind of process and sort of let go of what was before, to prepare myself for what was to come. And I think that allowing myself the time and the space to do that, because I was, the momentum of working, particularly in product development, because you're just cycling through one project to the next, and they're all kind of, going. The momentum of, allowing that momentum to eventually come to a full stop, and then to take a breath and go, okay, nothing next, just be with yourself right now. That was an important moment for me to have. I needed to be very conscious of that. I needed to actively do that. It wasn't a natural state for me to just sit and not do anything and be with myself.
I'm sure that's a challenge, and it's hard in the face of the world that teaches us to keep climbing, keep working harder, move, climb the ladder. I want to celebrate the fact that you recognize the necessity for you to have this. It wasn't gardening leave, it was like nature leave. It was like immersing yourself in a natural cyclical rhythm that wasn't Monday to Friday, meeting to meeting to meeting. It wasn't minutized. It wasn't this meeting cycle, so that you could hear yourself, you could hear your voice, you could hear what you wanted, and you could lean in and allow this thing to come through, but to process those feelings and those emotions, because 18 years is a lifetime. I use that example. It's not a lifetime, nowhere near. It's a lifetime of it's the start, but it's a big amount of time to be associated with one organization, and to let yourself process those emotions, to release the emotions, to let go, good, bad, happy, sad, whatever it was that was coming up, as you say. You could then move through that and evolve into being the founder, creator, and now head of Future Incorporated, which is going to do so phenomenally well in the world because it's so needed. We know this. I really want to celebrate that. That in itself is your career revolution tip. That message for anybody to hear is that give yourself that space and time. I mean, you had the good fortune of physical space that you didn't need to do anything in the next days or weeks after the departure, but it doesn't need to necessarily be that amount of physical space. It's about carving the time, whether it's weekends, whether it's after hours, to allow yourself to close a chapter before you move forward. Otherwise, you're just bringing all of that stuff into the new chapter. And what Future Incorporated is not is a mimicked version of what an organization or corporate would have wanted. It is you living and breathing and all your creative intelligence unleashed in the world.
Absolutely. It's about finding those pockets of time where you can truly just put it aside and just allow that inner voice to say whatever it needs to say, or just scream really into the void. That's also something I did.
And so tell us, Jaclyn, as we start rounding up the conversation, it feels there's so much more that I want to ask you. You're definitely going to be back on the Career Revolution podcast to tell us more about Future and the entrepreneurial journey, because there's exciting things coming through from that small but big-hearted business that you now run. Tell us how we can support you. I know that Future Incorporated has a growing and burgeoning presence on LinkedIn. So follow you on LinkedIn, your personal profile. The links to that will be in the comments. And sign up to the Future Incorporated company page and follow that. Again, links will be in the comments. Is there anything else that you can guide or direct us to where we can find you? Or is LinkedIn the mothership for now?
Yeah, I think LinkedIn is a great place to be. I'm on Instagram as Jaclyn Claire 1. I'm Claire with no I. It's just a wonderful place to share my creative inspiration, to share what moves me. I love Instagram for that. I think it's wonderful. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn. I think it's a great place to connect.
Fantastic. We absolutely will. And I know that you did prepare a very specific revolutionary tip, which I'd love us to end with you going into that. You've dropped so many revolutionary tips. I feel quite audacious asking you for yet another, but there was one particular thing that you felt you wanted to share. Could you let us know what that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's really one that is a very personal reflection, and it's don't be afraid to start over, even if you've spent decades in one field. I think you need to look at your skills through a different lens. They're often more versatile than you think, right? As long as you're combining what you're great at with what lights you up and fires you and fuels you, I think that needs to be the thing that guides you to whatever that next step or next stage is in your life. That's my tip. My hot
Magnificent. Tip. Wonderful, wonderful tip. Your hot tip. Thank you so much, Jaclyn. Thank you for your time. And to all of our listeners, please go ahead and ask as many questions in the comments. Jaclyn will be here to answer them, whether you're catching that on YouTube or on LinkedIn Live. Thank you, and be sure to subscribe so that you can stay tuned for round 2, when Jaclyn's definitely going to be coming back and telling us more. Thank you to everybody, and goodbye for today.
Thanks, Licia.